The Theater History Podcast is supported by HowlRound, a Knowledge Commons by and for the theater community. It's available on iTunes and howlround.com. Hi, and welcome to the Theater History Podcast. I'm Mike Leager. If you follow our Twitter and Facebook accounts, you've probably seen at least a few of the many amazing images that we share from the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts. Now they've added yet another fantastic set of treasures, a number of works by legendary stage designer Jo Mielziner. Today we're talking with assistant curator Annemarie van Roessel, who's written about the newly acquired designs for Broadway World. Annemarie, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
These new acquisitions add to the NYPL's already formidable collection of Mielziner's designs and papers. What can you tell us about him and about his work?
Well, I think Jo Mielziner is probably the most famous, most important Broadway set and costume designer of the 20th century. I think a lot of people would agree with that. He did primarily set designs. I think his first professional work was in 1921, and he was designing up and literally until the day he died. His last work was The Baker's Wife, and he was on his way, I think, to a meeting about it and sadly died in a taxi cab here in New York City. And along the way, those decades, he worked on so many famous works that people would recognize right away, even if they don't necessarily know his name. And he influenced generations of other designers and theater professionals along the way. And that's been true for the collections that I wrote about in Broadway World. One of them in particular is a collection from a man who was just so enamored and influenced by Mielziner's work that he decided to make his collecting focus about Mielziner. So.
And speaking of these new acquisitions, can you describe some of them? What do the highlights look like, and why are they significant?
Well, the two collections that I wrote about, the first one was a gift to us from a very important current lighting designer named Jules Fisher. He also has many, many credits to his name here on Broadway and around the United States. And Jules had such a connection with Mielziner that he set about acquiring Mielziner's renderings. Now, Mielziner worked, as all designers of his time did, in a number of different media. So designers would often start out with very simple, off-the-cuff sketches, and then as they worked through their designs in collaboration with the director and the playwright or the musical team and the other creative people involved in the production, his renderings, his designs would become a little bit more elaborate, and then at the very end, he would often do very, very polished, finished renderings that are really works of art. And so Jules was able to acquire those renderings from Mielziner, some from people to whom Mielziner had given these renderings, and eventually amassed a collection of extraordinary work. Fisher was collecting work, very, very famous works, especially musicals associated with Rodgers and Hammerstein. So we have Allegro, also work Mielziner did a lot with Tennessee Williams. So we have, for instance, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and Death of the Salesman. I can talk more about those in a bit. Those are just extraordinarily important and beautiful designs. There are a lot of other lesser-known works, again, back to Rodgers and Hammerstein and these incredible musicals that Mielziner was known for. There are some amazing designs in the Jules Fisher collection for Guys and Dolls, for Gypsy. There's some very, very important plays that he did. He did some really interesting work, for instance, with Leonard Bernstein on The Lark. But what really attracted Fisher to these renderings was the artistic quality of them, and that's really what I wanted to represent in this exhibit. A lot of people think about Mielziner's work as it appeared on the stage in 3 dimensions. And I have a background as an art historian, and when I first started looking at these designs, when they first came to us, I saw the work of a really gifted artist, and that's certainly what a lot of generations of set designers have also seen, and other designers have seen in Mielziner's work. His hand on the paper was extraordinarily skillful, and he was able to create worlds on paper that many designers really came to admire. So I was looking at these designs really with an eye toward explaining how Mielziner could be seen as a visual artist on paper, the process that he went through to create these designs in 2 dimensions, which then, of course, were translated into 3 dimensions on the stage. One thing that Mielziner was especially talented in doing was using watercolor. So some of the images that you'll see in the Broadway World article, I think, and certainly in the exhibit that I did here, show just the incredible deftness that he had with watercolor, which is a very difficult medium. It bleeds, it runs, it's difficult to layer colors. And he just was a genius at doing that. Just evoking atmosphere and depth with very, very translucent layers of color, really extraordinary. So I'm just trying to show Mielziner in a slightly different angle, and that's certainly what Fisher could see as well, and we're so grateful for his gift.
Now, how can visitors to the library see these designs?
They are in 2 cases on the 3rd floor at the Library for the Performing Arts. So if you come to the library, just come up the elevators and into our research floor. That's the 3rd floor. And then the 2 cases are very visible. We certainly have more from both the Jules Fisher collection and the other collection, which I'll mention in a minute. All of the works that form these 2 collections are available to the public. You don't need an appointment. You don't need to prove that you're a scholar or a researcher or anyone fancy. You simply come and get a library card, and we will deliver the drawings to you, the prints to you in the reading room. If I could go back for a minute and talk about the other collection quickly that I have in the case, it's a related collection in terms of gathering very, very lovely, beautiful renderings. It comes from a slightly different source, which is from Mary Rogers Gettle, who is the daughter of Richard Rogers, again, going back to Rogers and Hammerstein fame. And so these designs came to Richard Rogers through his association with Mielziner. Rogers and Hammerstein used Mielziner on many of their projects. And these, as I was saying earlier, these really extraordinarily beautiful final renderings were often given to the very significant members of the creative team and sometimes the cast as well. So Rogers got sort of the pick of the litter, and the designs then were passed down to Mary, and she was very, very generous in her will. She died a few years ago. In her will, she bequeathed these designs to us. We're extraordinarily grateful, and they really complement our existing Mielziner holdings and really extend the visual richness of the renderings that we got from Jules Fisher. So as you can imagine from Mary Rogers, because it was Richard Rogers with the provenance, these are extraordinary drawings and renderings from very, very significant Broadway milestone projects like Carousel, Pal Joey, South Pacific, The King and I, Oklahoma, On Your Toes, Me and Juliet. I mean, these are extraordinarily important and very, very famous shows.
Working with these materials sounds fascinating. It's such a unique job. I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit more about what working as a curator at the Library for the Performing Arts entails. I mean, what do you do in your job?
Well, my background is as an archivist, which means that I was trained to care for, to describe, to make available collections of materials that are often unique. So they can come from individual people, and they can also come from organizations, associations, companies, for instance. So here at the Performing Arts Libraries, the kind of archives that we get come from, for theater, they come from producers, directors, playwrights, actors, stage managers, designers of all sorts, and theater companies, literary agencies, PR folks. And what I do as a curator is to help acquire these materials. I speak with the donors, talk to them about what they've got, what they would like to give us, how we can arrange for the transfer of that material to us. And then I help get it here and help make sure that it is housed correctly, it is described well, and eventually made available to researchers here in our library. We also have a lot of exhibitions that happen here, and we loan materials to other institutions. And we have an extensive range of programs that people can come here to see the materials. So as a curator, I'm involved sort of behind the scenes and also front of the house, if you can say that in the theater parlance. So we're an extraordinary team. We have librarians and archivists and digital researchers. It's really just such a fascinating and dynamic place to work. I love working directly with researchers as well on their projects and helping connect them to the materials that we have. Talking to researchers also helps inform us about how we can seek out new materials to acquire for our collections.
In working with all these different materials, obviously there's so much more at the library besides these great new Mielziner acquisitions. What else would you say are some of your favorite collections, particular favorite items?
Well, as I was saying earlier, I'm trained as an art historian and a design historian, and so working with collections like those of Jules Fisher and Jo Mielziner, very visual collections, really appeals to me. I am particularly interested in making sure that those collections are housed correctly, cared for, preserved. They can often be very difficult because they're large and fragile. In terms of subject matter, I certainly have a soft spot for avant-garde theater, especially from the mid to late 20th century. And one collection in particular, one theater in particular that I've been very, very passionate about is really the birthplace of off-Broadway, which is the Cafe Chino. And I've written about that on Broadway World as well. But it's something that I continue to work with. And for me as a curator, one of the great joys that I have is not just working with the physical material, but also with the donors. And in the case of Cafe Chino, what really makes that collection really come alive for me is the fact that so many of the people involved in Cafe Chino, which ran in New York, was operating in New York from 1958 to 1968, so many of those people are coming to a point where they're really interested in making sure that whatever materials they have are now in a safe place. And so it's the sort of last years of trying to collect the last bits of Chino material that are still out in private hands and finding it, talking to the people who have it, and trying to help them find a good place for it, whether it's with us or someone else. I'm just so amazed at the passion for the people who worked with Chino have in that legacy, and the fact that we can collect so much of it here and make it available for researchers. It's incredibly rewarding.
One final question that kind of pertains to the overall theme of this show. We keep asking episode after episode, sort of what's the value of preserving the history of live performance? It's this ephemeral thing that, it's here one minute, gone the next. I'm curious where you see archives like the Library for Performing Arts fitting into the process of both remembering theater but also creating new work.
Well, that's interesting that you ask that. One quick thing that comes to mind, especially in the case of Jo Mielziner, is that in fact he did, I referenced earlier, an extraordinarily innovative and provocative and meaningful design for Death of a Salesman. And very recently that was revived on Broadway, and they came here and used the Jo Mielziner materials to reconstruct his design. And it received just rave reviews, the whole production. So our archives we consider as living, in many ways, as living documents, right? They inform work that's being created now. So many of the researchers who come to us use our archives as they're preparing for roles, as they're reinterpreting classic texts. They come for inspiration. They come for expanding their knowledge of the work. And they can take bits of what they see and leave bits of what they see, but it really helps them give context to whatever it is that they're imagining will come in their history, in their theater work. So we also get scholars who come and are writing to document the past, but I think our archives go both ways. They both go backward and they go forward.
We'll post a link to Annemarie's article about the new Mielziner acquisitions, as well as a number of links to the New York Public Library's Mielziner material. Annemarie, thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
If you'd like to continue today's conversation, please visit howlround.com and follow HowlRound and @TheaterHistory on Twitter. A big thank you to the staff at HowlRound who make this show possible. Our theme music is The Black Crook Gallop, which comes to us courtesy of the New York Public Library Libretto Project and Adam Roberts. Thanks as well to Tip Kress, who designed our logo. And finally, thank you for listening.